Hey, howdy, and welcome, kids. It is time, once again, for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. We are turning the month. This episode is for January 29th through February 4th. I cannot believe we're already getting into the second month of 2024. Times are flying. It's actually a very quiet week astrologically. And I mean, behind us was so much stuff, just the Pluto and Sun conjunction and the changing of signs and that rock'em sock'em full-mooned Leo. But it's a very, very quiet month in the 7 days of like Monday through next Sunday that we cover on this podcast. So because there's a little bit less to talk about, I'm actually going to do two questions from astrology. Thanks to everybody who's been sending those in. I love the questions. This first one is from Justine, who writes, Dear Dr. Lennox, it is such a pleasure to be writing this to you and to be part of this community. Your work has been an invaluable part of my healing journey. Thank you. You know, that's partly why I like to read these questions, to say out loud the lovely things that people say about me and you. So half the questions say something about you, like we love you too, Zoe. So there you have it. Your podcast was the first place I learned about a quincunx, the great eliminator angle. Yeah, my favorite. I feel I have a good grasp on what this energy is and what it asks of you as a transit that passes. But how would this energy present itself in a birth chart? And how could one best work with that energy for their growth and evolution? I recently realized that I have 3 in my birth chart, 1 exact in conjunct. Thank you for your wisdom and insight, Justine.
Okay, that's kind of cool. 3.
No, that's a great question. Like, this is one of those, like, woohoo! Great question, and astrologically savvy in how she languaged it, right? So she knows a little bit about her astrology. And this is my favorite angle in transits, and the reason why is because it has this energetic quality of the small adjustments, right? It's like a freeway exit. In fact, I would say the angle of a freeway exit really is a 150-degree angle, and the exit itself from the freeway to the exit is 30 degrees, and then the angle from you, the driver, towards that exit is 150 degrees, right? So in transit, it's about making small adjustments and then behaving differently because of the small adjustments over time. And this is how we grow mostly in life. And so I love talking about this transit. But think of this narrow angle as like a seesaw, right? It's 2 energies that are not quite dynamically opposing each other, right? So that's not happening. And they're not easily trining each other in the trine, right? That's the other angles on the other side. 180 angle is the opposition, 120 is the trine, and this inconjunct one, this quincunx, great eliminator angle, is a 150-degree angle. So one way I sometimes describe it as the either-or that it is in natal charts is like a seesaw. It's an either-or geometry. It's an angle that can't support both planets at the same time. That's why it's like a seesaw. A seesaw is one of those objects that can only support one person at the bottom and one person at the top at a time. They can change places, but they can't be in balance, really, ever. Except maybe precariously.
Yeah, this is just making me think about like the balance within ourselves. Maybe I'm just getting too emotional on a recording morning, but I'm like, wait, is this a poetic angle?
Well, in some way, that's a beautiful sort of way to like be curious about it, Zoe. What it says is whatever two planets in the chart that are holding this angle is you're going to feel one or the other of them as sort of dominant, but only one at a time, right? That you'll either, so for example, you use the idea of being very emotional, right? So say we were talking about like Venus and Mercury in an inconjunct, where Venus is emotions and Mercury is rational thought. And if those two planets were holding a 150-degree angle, that person might struggle with being either in their feelings fully or in their rationale fully, but have trouble doing both at the same time, either or.
Huh.
You know, in synastry between two charts, it's the same thing. If two sun signs are in a 150-degree relationship, like Pisces sun, Leo sun. I'm a Leo sun. My first two boyfriends were Pisces suns. That's an inconjunct. That's a all angles in dating through sun sign is compatible. It's just a quality of energy. But in a Pisces Leo inconjunct sun sign relationship, as long as those two people know who leads when, it's a good compatibility. You know, one person leads, the other person leads, either or.
So then are you, I'm thinking about last week's episode. Are you alluding to when we Google, are Aquarius and Libra compatible? Like, that's some bullshit too, right?
Well, it's not.
Is that what you're saying?
Well,
sorry,
no, actually,
I know this is a little off topic, but
it is a little off topic. But let me address it real quick, because it's sun sign incompatibility is not wrong. It's just less relevant than people think it is. Because how you relate intimately is Venus, communicate Mercury, sex is Mars. And so sun sign's not going to give you any information except a very vague general sense of compatibility that, yes, you will feel in the room. But there's also this notion that some people will therefore say that some sun signs are not compatible with others, and that's not true. Stylistically, two sun signs that have different geometries in relationship will feel that geometry as a function of their compatibility, like this either or. But if two people are good with who they are and good with being graceful about letting someone else lead, and those two people have suns in an inconjunct, that's a compatible relationship. So it's like the answer to the question is yes and no. So to understand this dynamic in a natal chart, consider the consciousness of the two planets that are holding this either or 150-degree angle, and then recognize that what that reflects is some way in which you lean towards one or the other in a quality that doesn't necessarily blend. But when you know that, you can operate efficiently just by understanding that that's how you operate. Well, Zoe, Paula writes the next question, and her first sentence is, I love your podcast. You and Zoe are just delightful.
Woo! Hi, Paula.
Yeah, right? Paula goes on, thank you for all you so generously share with your followers. My question is about the rising sign. I have a really difficult time teasing out the meaning and function of the ascendant in a personality. I have mostly read that it is the mask or impression you give of yourself. I've also studied esoteric astrology that considers the rising sign to be the soul's purpose, or that which one is rising to in their lifetime. Ooh, that's poetic language. I like that. From my experience as a Scorpio rising, I feel my ascendant deeply and would not say that it is just how others perceive me. In fact, I don't think many people would describe me as scorpionic. I think that people who don't know me well would describe me more as my Libra sun sign. Can you shed some light, please? Thanks so much, Paula. Let me start by saying the rising sign is so sensitive that there should be lots of language around what it is. So that, Paula, the language you used, like the 3 ways you describe the rising sign, they're all accurate. And some more, right? So that's one of the things or challenges about being really simple and clear about what the rising sign is it is the most sensitive point in a chart, which is why it's so important to know the time of birth. The more speed involved in the body that creates the point, the more sensitive it is. In other words, your moon sign is more sensitive than your sun by far because the sun has a much, much, much slower orbit than the moon. But the rising sign is the fastest thing. It's the one that's described by the spin of the earth. That's a very fast-moving point. Every 4 minutes of time, the degree of the rising sign changes by 1. So it's a very sensitive point that is just like the eastern horizon with us, what's coming over the horizon. So is it the mask or the impression you give of yourself? Yes. Is it the soul or soul's purpose or what you're rising to in this lifetime? Yes. Is it how you relate to others? Yes. Is it how others see you? Yes. Is it, it's like it's all of these things. When I am doing a session, my language is always your rising sign is how you meet the world and how the world sees you. It's the interaction between you and the world. Just like the eastern horizon is how we understand the sun is coming up. Right? So it's that the sun coming up across the eastern horizon is like this dynamic excitement of some big new thing coming in to the day. And our rising sign is the excitement of you coming into the room. So I think of rising sign more of like behaviors of interaction in the world. Like I'm a Sagittarius rising, and that's very apparent by the way I move about the world. I move about fast. I'm the first one in. I'm the first one to go. I'm done when I'm done. I'm abrupt in ways that is challenging to other people because I relate to the world through that lens of the Sagittarius archetype. Scorpio, it's so funny that like you're a Scorpio rising, Paula, that you're writing to. Because one of the things about Scorpios, they can be very hidden. They can create an aura that is not quite visible because Scorpio is a sign that invented the idea of like sort of throwing up a smoke screen and a hidden sensibility. It's the sign of secrets. So I think it's hysterical that sometimes people don't see your Scorpio rising, but they feel your Libra rising instead. There's something ironic and funny about that. So just as I described my behaviors of moving about the world through the lens of Sagittarius, I would encourage you, Paula, to think about how do you move about the world through the lens of Scorpio? Both Libra and Scorpio are about connections. Right? Libra is about the harmonious experience of seeing each other in the mirror, and Scorpio is about the intensity of what's possible when two energies come together and collaborate. So to understand, I'm speaking now to Paula as Scorpio rising and me as a Sagittarius rising, and there are 10 other rising signs, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but I invite you listeners to think about how to understand your rising sign better. Consider how do you behave in the world that matches the archetypal sensibilities of the sign that is your rising sign. So as I said at the top of the podcast, there is not a whole lot going on in the astrology between January 29th and February 4th. But let's talk about what there is to talk about. Let's start with an overview and a lay of the land, right? We got Sun in Aquarius, so we're still in the Aquarius mansion for most of this month. So we're in the conscious awareness of risk, innovation, trying things that are out of the box, exploring new territory. All of the personal planets are in Capricorn, Mars, Venus, and Mercury. So that means our entire personal bodies this week are engaged in discipline, responsibility, focus, movement. Yeah, so it could be a very productive week. Without planets making big waves, we're riding less big waves. That could bring about more focus and less distractibility because the planets aren't giving big waves of energy that will generate and cause challenges or breakdowns in the way that some weeks are just ripe with. And yeah, Capricorn is a beautiful, archetype for getting things done. I've been giving Venus overviews for the last, I don't know how long, and there's nothing to say about Venus this week. She's fairly quiet.
Not
Nope.
one thing.
She does not make one
Wow.
aspect with another planet during the 7 days of the 29th through the 4th. And so all there is to say about Venus is that she's in Capricorn still. And so our emotional bodies are sort of in the direction of seriousness, sobriety, responsibility, and a slower kind of emotional pace. Since there's not a whole lot to talk about, I'll mention the fact that we are in the 3rd quarter moon on Friday. That's a thing. It's one of the 4 pillars of every lunar cycle. So in the new moon, we sort of starting over again. There's a new cycle beginning, and there's a kind of a thrust forward with the new moon. At the 1st quarter, a week later, the sun and moon are now at a 90-degree angle with each other. That's the first crisis where the seeds we plant will either fail or thrive. Then a week later, we have the full moon where we're harvesting the benefit of everything we've been working on during that lunar cycle and releasing the stuff that we no longer need. And then there's one more square before the next lunar cycle begins, which will be with next week's Aquarius new moon. We have the 3rd quarter moon on Friday. It's a Scorpio moon, so it's going to be a little emotionally intense. And it does put us at odds between our conscious awareness and our unconscious impulses. Similar in sensation to the 1st quarter moon, but now we've been through the full moon. We've learned something. We've gathered some wisdom that we've celebrated, and we've become aware of things that we need to release. So the full moon is a big change for us. And then in the 3rd quarter moon, we're in a crisis between our conscious awareness and unconscious impulses, but it's about sharing our new wisdom with the world. Right? So as we move towards the end of the week, you might be tested to show up a little bit stronger, better, wiser, because you've learned a little something. That's the nature of every 3rd quarter moon. And then on Sunday, which we will also talk about on Monday of next week's podcast, Mercury is going to change signs. Mercury will move into Aquarius, which is where Pluto is. So that's what we're going to talk about at the top of next week's pod, about what it'll be to have Mercury and Pluto conjunct. This signals a couple of things. One is we leave the territory of our mind being focused on responsibility and grounded purpose, Capricorn, and into the territory of innovative, out-of-the-box, intuitively driven thinking. Not only is that a wonderful place for Mercury to be for our benefit, right? We get to think radical new thoughts while Mercury is in Aquarius and take risks with our voices. So for 3.5 weeks, that's the sensation of our mind's expression. But it's also the beginning of what's called the free and clear portion of Mercury's cycle. Meaning he's not retrograde, he ain't going to go retrograde, and we got 2 months with no bumpiness in sight because Mercury's going straight. Then in 2 months he'll begin. Yeah, it's awesome. He'll begin his next retrograde cycle in late March. So it's a great time when Mercury is in his free and clear to plan things within the next 2 months that might require communication to be part of your dissemination of an idea, project, or an event, without delay being a guarantee of part of the process. So, that's it, kids. There's really no more to talk about in the week ahead. Next week, not so much. We got Mercury and Pluto coming together on Monday. We've got a new moon in Aquarius coming up next week. There'll be plenty to talk about in next week's pod. But meanwhile, do your best to enjoy a quieter week. See what you can do in the world of accomplishment and discipline and responsibility with the personal planets in Capricorn. And as I love to say, have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have an email in dream, and I picked someone's reoccurring childhood nightmare just because, one, I think it's funny. Like, well, just this idea that, like, I know so many adults, myself included, we all remember that 1, 2, or 3 reoccurring nightmares as children.
No, it's great.
And they're kind of cartoonish. And also, I had such a disorienting morning this morning in which there are other factors. It was disorienting going to bed, and then I woke up early, and then I was like, oh no, I can sleep 1 more hour. Because I didn't have my phone, I set an alarm on my computer, whatever. It didn't go off. And I just had the most upsetting second round of dreaming in the morning.
Dear.
And so when I woke up, it was like just extremely disorienting. And it reminds me of the question from last week. And then that's why I also picked kind of a nightmare.
Well, I love it. I love that you're, using your own, mood to sort of guide where we go. But,
Well, what's with that?
We spend longer in REM the later in the sleep cycle. Right. So your first REM cycle at night, which will happen about an hour and a half to 2 hours after you go to bed, you will spend the least amount of time in REM. And the final one, whenever that is, you will spend the most amount of time in REM. It's not a lot of time. It's a handful of minutes.
Yeah.
But this is why we tend to remember our early morning dreams vividly. It's not just because they're close to when we're waking. It's also because they're likely to be more vivid, longer, and more full.
Interesting.
I also think there's this interesting thing that happens sometimes when people either nap and have a wacky dream or fall back asleep and wind up having a intense dream experience. I think you were called back into sleep to process some stress through the dream state. Like, I think you fell asleep again because of the dream energy that needed to happen to regulate so you could wake up regulated from something your psyche needed to express. Hence, the deep sleeping, the intense dream when you weren't necessarily planning to even be asleep. And I only say so, Zoe, because I've heard too many stories of people who say, I fell asleep for a nap, or I just went back to sleep after I woke up, and then I had this crazy, crazy, crazy dream. It happens.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, let's dive in.
All right. So here is Laura's reoccurring dream from her youth. She says, I had this dream in exactly the same way multiple times until around puberty. So this is like in childhood. It's daytime. I'm with my paternal grandparents in an alleyway in a big city. They lead me to a fire escape and we start climbing it. The dream is so vivid that I hear the sound of our feet on the metal steps. I feel nervous as we climb higher and higher. I see the blue sky in the open spaces between the steps. We go all the way to the rooftop, which is empty, except for a bright red bubblegum machine at the opposite side. As I tentatively step towards it, I feel afraid. I'm scared of heights, and also excited about the promise of sweets. My grandparents coax me onwards. As I reach the gumball machine at the outer edge of the roof, my grandparents stand on either side of me with their arms around my shoulders and wordlessly push me over the edge.
Wow.
Though it's been many decades since I've had this nightmare, typing it still produces flutters in my belly. Wow. I'd love to know what that might have meant and why I stopped having it. I love your voice and have taken one of your classes. I look forward to learning more in years to come. With gratitude, Laura.
Oh, okay. Wow. Wow.
I love the childness of it too with the bubblegum machine.
Right. No, it's got delightful childlike imagery and you know, a bubblegum machine is a kind of a promise of an exchange, right? It's a delightful exchange. If I give this, I'll get that. I got to put my penny in, I get my gumball out, and it's a very childlike idea. Okay, I do love this dream so much. It feels like an initiation experience.
Ah.
Right? There's this place, this sacred place that's gotten to, and it's got a high vantage point. You have to climb to get to it. So on a certain level, it's like we got to go to a higher level to create this ritualized experience. And then there's an altar.
Yeah.
It's the red gumball machine. That's like an altar. Then there's this like sacred moment where they're on either side of her. That seems to me very sort of like ancestral initiatory. They have your back. They've got their hands. Did you say that their hands are on her shoulders?
Yes. Arms around the shoulders.
Yeah, even that is very ceremonial.
Yes.
So then for me, then the pushing off of the roof has to be ceremonial, important, worth the climb. And it's an image of surrender, right? Right? If we take away the waking life idea, like if my grandparents pushed me off the roof in life, very bad, right?
Yeah.
I'm dead and they go to jail.
Yeah, but if it's a Pixar movie, it would probably be a pinnacle moment, you know?
Right, where there'd be some radical change and transformation because of the surrender required to dive off. So even right there, there's something instructive. That to me, that there's something instructive about all of these dream images. So now that I've given a loose sort of structure of how this dream is landing on me, let's move through it.
Okay.
First of all, it goes away at puberty because Laura's complete with some level of her development at puberty, where then it's no longer a necessary, message from her soul. It's a message for Laura as a child, right? So it is guidance being offered before the full formation of Laura that's chemically induced by puberty. That's why I think it goes away, because we become more of who we are and are going to be as adults in puberty. And so our prepubescent experience is just very, very different. And clearly this surrender dream is, golly, now I don't know how to finish that sentence. It just, obviously, it stopped. So there was some reason why it stopped. And I think it's because she became more fully formed in puberty. It's important that the dream is a daytime dream because it means we're not in a shadow expression. Even though something yucky happens and it might have a scary sensation in it from the fear that Laura felt in the dream, the fact that it's daytime means we're in some consideration of life on life's terms. This is where I go, this is an instructive dream that's showing Laura some things about how to move through life. So then what the building and the fire escape and the metal steps represent for me is the way we construct our lives by choices and behaviors and the things we build that are our creations. And then the bleeding through of the sky and the open spaces is the organic life in which Laura is being shown, here's how you build a life of consciousness. We create buildings that are like our life journey. So that's the sensation that came over me. Like, what would this dream mean if this were my dream, if I was climbing this fire escape during the day? I always go, when we're in urban settings, of buildings as symbols of constructs of consciousness. And they are the constructs of how we move about the world. Another sort of initiatory thing is that anytime we're climbing higher in the dream state, on some level, it's about learning more. Getting to a higher vantage point where you can see more clearly. So just the act of climbing up in the dream, led by her grandparents, is also, it seems to me, constructive. Like, hey, Laura, you must seek to climb to higher and higher levels of your experience, even when it's scary to do so. And then the dream says the rooftop is the sacred place to get to. So what's the rooftop in symbolism? It's the highest you can get in any construct of consciousness. So if the building is a construct of consciousness, its roof is the highest you can get in that particular construct of consciousness. So then the reward of the gumball machine is like grandma and grandpa saying, it's valuable to seek higher ground, higher wisdom, learning more, operating at higher levels, because once you get to the sort of top place, there's a reward. And this is the gumball machine. She even says that in the dream, while she's frightened of the height, right? She's frightened of the whole thing. She's excited by the sweet, the promise of the sweet. So that to me, again, seems instructive. Like, climb heights, which is risky, move forward and upward with fear, and you will get the rewards that exist only when we climb to the highest place of our conscious available awareness. And then it's like when the grandparents throw her off the roof, that to me it's about surrender in life, take risks, throw yourself into new territory that's unknown with abandon, because that's how you climb up the next mountain or the next building. You got to jump off the building you've climbed. That's instructive too. I could even go so far as to say that this is an instructive moment that says death is coming and soon we'll be ancestors. Ooh. And here's what that looks like. At a certain point, you just surrender to death. I'm grabbing for that one.
Okay.
Right? Right? But you see where how I'm perceiving this, so does it make some sense, at least, to how I'm sort of retelling the story?
No, I'm following. Yeah, I'm following it.
Great. So that to me is what it's about. It's an instructive dream that was helping Laura's unconscious process some of the wisdom that she was learning. And then, I'll just sort of repeat what I said about, I think then puberty just, threw all those chemicals in her brain, creating a whole nother mountain or building to climb and explore and investigate. So this dream fulfilled its purpose and clearly has stayed with Laura for a long time. And I'm kind of hoping that some of the perspective that I'm offering might help you, Laura, sort of internalize this dream in a new and more integrated way.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.